Welcome to Alpine Lumber's Hazard Communication Training. This training is required for all new hires and it'll take about 30 minutes to complete. There will be a short quiz at the end, so pay attention. You'll also hear hazard communication referred to as Hazcom, which includes the training, the program, and all of the policies associated with hazard communication. You can find the complete Hazcom program in the Alpine Lumber Safety Manual. This document is located on the Alpine Lumber intranet. What's the purpose of hazard communication training? Well, we want to evaluate the chemicals you use while working, and we want to ensure your exposure is not an overexposure. What does that mean when I say we want to ensure your exposure is not an overexposure? The term exposed means having contact with something. You're exposed to smog when you're in a big city. You're exposed to gasoline vapors when you fill up your tank. You're exposed to UV rays when you're outdoors. This doesn't mean you're overexposed. We want to control overexposures when dealing with chemicals at Alpine Lumber. Overexposure is when the body's had too much contact with a chemical, such as getting a sunburn from UV rays, or getting nose cancer from overexposure to welding fume. In the case of an overexposure, we want to take action to limit the effects so that you're not injured or made sick by that overexposure. If you've had Hazcom training in the past, you'll know what a safety data sheet's all about. You may have heard them called material safety data sheets, but now they're just safety data sheets. They all come in the same format, makes it easier to read, easier to find information. Some of the sections of the SDSs that you'll need to be aware of are Section 1 is the identification of the product. Section 2 is the hazard identification. It does contain required label elements, so if you have a secondary container, you need this section. Section 3 is the actual ingredients of the chemical. Section 4 is first aid measures. This is very important if you are overexposed. Section 6 is accidental release measures. This is important if you have a big spill, and it'll tell you what PPE to use and how to clean it up properly. Section 7 is handling and storage, and just what it says, it's precautions for safe handling and safe storage of the chemical. Section 8 is personal protective equipment, or PPE. So do you need glasses? Do you need goggles? Do you need a respirator, gloves, a Tyvek suit? All that will be in Section 8. Section 11 is toxicological information. So how do you get exposed or overexposed to this chemical? So all of that is in there for you to read for every chemical. You just need to look at the SDS. Here I've given you a section of a safety data sheet. Don't get overwhelmed by all of the information. Alpine Lumber doesn't work with very many chemicals that you don't also use in your daily life. Ask your supervisor, your manager, or me, Lan Berry, the safety manager, if you have any questions about the chemicals you work with. What information is missing that you would need to figure out what product this is? It's like making a recipe with only the ingredients and no directions or the final product identifier. You might use this product like a normal consumer, but they're required to create these safety data sheets for those who might use the chemical in large quantities or in unusual handling situations, something like that. If you take a look at the information on the SDS, you can see there are stages to overexposure, and none of it seems like a chemical we would ever want to be around. It lists nausea, vomiting, coma, possible death. Remember, the safety data sheets let us know what happens in an overexposure, how we take precautions to prevent that. We're hoping that we use these chemicals almost as any normal consumer would use them. So again, we're talking about exposure versus overexposure. There's a lot of information on the safety data sheets, and not all of it will be valuable to the work you're doing. But I'm here to help you figure that out. So remember, it's important that you have all the information you need to make a decision about working with the chemical or the product. The information we were just reading on the last slide was for antifreeze. It's a commonly used product that, under normal use situation, it doesn't cause vomiting or coma or death. You should use caution when pouring this product, but in normal use situations, you shouldn't have a problem with it. A glove resistant to liquids is called impermeable. For the work we do, most of the chemicals we work with can be used with any impermeable glove. That means you want to avoid leather or mechanics gloves where liquids soak in and they just stay there. We aren't using quantities that will break through the glove's protective coating unless we spill it or we use really large quantities, and maybe if we're using some chemical with a rag where it's soaking into the rag, then we may have to look at other glove choices. But if you're just working with antifreeze normally, almost any glove will do. OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or it's the government entity that makes the rules about what you can and can't do for safety in any industry, they say that employers must take protective measures regarding the use of chemicals. So how you use a chemical at home versus how you use it at work are two different things. We're following OSHA rules. So at home you might not worry about using gloves with bleach for cleaning, but at work we might require gloves. We might require a respirator, safety glasses, or goggles. Just understand that work and home are different, and we have to follow very specific rules. There's lots of ways you can be hurt by exposure to chemicals. This is why we need to know what chemicals employees are working with, how they're using them, and how we can protect against harm. The term acute means immediate, such as burning yourself on a hot stove. Chronic means over time, such as getting skin cancer from too much sun exposure. Sensitization is when your body overreacts to an exposure, such as a bee sting allergy. Mutagenicity is a type of cancer, and so is carcinogenicity. Target organ toxicity is when a chemical doesn't hurt any other body part except a single organ, such as a chemical that just targets the kidney. Okay, I've talked about the ways you can be harmed. Now I want to make clear the difference between the word toxic and hazardous. They're often used interchangeably, but they don't mean the same thing. Something that is toxic is inherent to that chemical. Something that is hazardous is the way that chemical is used. So let's say we have a lead brick and it's just sitting here on the tabletop and no one's touching it, no one's licking it, no one's eating it. It's just a lead brick. That lead brick is toxic. Our bodies can't use lead in any way. Lead is toxic to the human body. But it's really not hazardous. It's just sitting there. It's not off-gassing. Nothing's happening to it. However, let's take water. Our body uses a lot of water. Water is really non-toxic. I mean, it would take so much water to be toxic to the body that it's so rare to have a toxicity to water. However, if I throw someone in a lake that can't swim, that's very hazardous. So water has just become hazardous. It's the way in which it's used. I just want you to understand the difference between the two, because if you're reading these safety data sheets and you see that something's toxic, I want you to pay attention to how it's being used and what protective measures you're taking against that toxicity. The product you're looking at here on this section of a safety data sheet is gasoline. Gasoline is something that almost every yard has, and they work with in one way or another. You have access to all the safety information on the chemicals we work with. They're located on the Alpine Lumber intranet. You can access them by going to the Safety tab on any Alpine Lumber computer. You can ask any counter person or anyone else with an Alpine Lumber computer to get you a safety data sheet. You have the right to know about the chemicals you work with. So what kinds of things would you think about with any new chemical? Does it have a smell? Is it flammable? Do I need any special PPE or protective equipment? What would I do in an emergency? What other questions would you ask or expect to have training on with any chemical? Here again we have the safety data sheet for gasoline. You might remember that I said SDSs are not written for normal conditions of use. Most of us deal with gasoline on a regular basis, and we don't obtain special instructions as it says here. However, at work we take special precautions for everyone's sake, including storage of flammables so they're kept from sparks and flames. We want to avoid breathing the vapor. Wash your hands, especially wash your hands before you smoke or before you eat or drink, after you've used something like gasoline. The SDS should be helping a person figure out how to clean up a spill and other precautions if in unusual situations, like maybe you're in a confined space or maybe you need methods to detect the unexpected release of the chemical. In the case of gasoline, there would be a noticeable smell. Here are the symptoms and side effects of overexposure to gasoline. It's important to know this stuff before you work with the chemical so that you can help yourself and you can help a coworker. You should always be wearing safety glasses at Alpine Lumber. If you're cleaning with any petroleum-based products, you need to wear impermeable gloves. Remember, you're not at home, you're at work. If you're cleaning up a large spill, stop. Make sure you have everything you need. Make sure you're not going to cause injury or harm to anyone else. It's not an emergency if no one's being injured. Step back, figure out what the steps are to get it done safely before you just jump in. If it is an emergency, call 911. All safety data sheets have symbols or pictograms for the categories of hazards found on the safety data sheets. You see them all listed here. You won't see all of these pictograms on our safety data sheets because we don't have any corrosives on site. We don't have any exploding bombs. We do have the flame, skull and crossbones. We have gas cylinders. We have a lot of gases under pressure like propane. The health hazard, we will also see the exclamation mark. We have a lot of irritants on site. So when you see these, you know that they mean the same thing for every safety data sheet. Here's an example of the skull and crossbones symbol or pictogram. It's an acute exposure. What's that? An acute exposure is when bad things happen very quickly. So this is a product you might use at Alpine Lumber. Acetone is an organic solvent. Most organic solvents are central nervous system depressants. It acts like a general anesthetic, inhibiting brain activity. So alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. Other things that are central nervous system depressants that you might encounter at Alpine Lumber are methanol, benzene, which is found in fuels, toluene, which is found in paints, xylene, it's found in a lot of cleaning agents. Formaldehyde is found in carpets, walls, furniture. These are all central nervous system depressants. Most require very high doses to cause this effect. But skin irritation will occur over time, so impermeable gloves should be used and will be required if you're using it in a way that it gets on your skin. Like if you're pouring the product onto a rag and wiping it with the cloth. If you're cleaning up a spill, you will be required to use gloves. Find ways to use it that limit your skin exposure. Some organic solvents are more hazardous than others. Xylene is a very strong central nervous system depressant. I'd like to talk about corrosives for just a minute. We really want to eliminate corrosives from all of our yards. If you have corrosives on site, you must have an eye wash. You're better off just to find another product. So a corrosive is a chemical that does irreversible damage. Other health hazards are acids and bases. It's not that important that you know the difference, except that acids, like vinegar and lemon juice, they burn the skin. Our skin is far less receptive to acids than to bases. Bases are things like bleach and soap. It'll make your skin feel slick. If you can picture yourself using a bar of soap and how it makes your skin feel kind of slimy, that's a base. Your skin is not as reactive to bases as it is to acids. Many of the chemicals you work with both at home and at work are going to be irritants. Irritation as far as a safety data sheet is concerned, means the problem is reversible. So to reduce the possibility of irritation, we need to reduce our exposure. This can be done through the use of safety glasses or goggles, through PPE like gloves, and using chemicals in well-ventilated areas. Paint thinner or mineral spirits is a central nervous system depressant, and it also causes eye irritation. If you wear gloves and safety glasses, don't touch your eyes. You'll be okay if you use this product in a normal, everyday way. You can be exposed through inhalation of the vapors, so you're really best to use it in a well-ventilated area. Don't wear leather gloves with a chemical like this, because if you spill it and it soaks into the leather glove, it's also soaking into your hand. And like we said, it's an irritant. So it will cause irritation if you just leave it sitting on your hands. It's better to wear impermeable gloves. Notice also that paint thinner is flammable, so it has a whole bunch of hazards that you need to be aware of when using this product. Chronic exposure to diesel fumes is thought to cause cancer. Diesel fuel is a mixture of chemicals, and two of the chemicals are responsible for the potential carcinogenic effects through diesel exhaust particulate. So don't stand near diesel exhaust, don't park a diesel and keep it running near the intake of a building. Those are a couple of ways that you can protect yourself and protect others. Diesel is easily absorbed through the skin, although this is not considered a carcinogenic exposure. Our use of diesel at pumps at the gas station and using safety cans is not going to create a hazard if you're not getting it on your skin. If you're getting it on your skin, we need to find the right glove for you. How can you determine if you've had a release of diesel? And what emergency measures would you take if there was a spill? These are things that you need to know before working with a chemical. You've seen that flammables have the symbol or pictogram of a flame on the SDS. Besides gasoline and diesel, at Alpine Lumber we also have aerosol paints, propane, and there's other flammables on site. It's best to store flammables inside of an approved flammables cabinet, which means self-closing doors, having an inner lip to catch spills. OSHA has limits for flammables that aren't stored inside of one of these flammable cabinets. The limits are 25 gallons of Category 1 flammable liquids, which means gasoline or other highly flammable liquids, and 120 gallons of Category 2, 3, or 4 flammable liquids. These are less flammable, such as diesel. So that's the amount you can have outside of a flammables cabinet. Because you don't have to store flammables in a flammables cabinet doesn't mean you shouldn't take care of those flammables. Good housekeeping and good storage will prevent a fire. You may not store flammables indoors if they're not in a flammables cabinet. Most of our yards have battery terminal cleaner on hand. This is a flammable aerosol. Safety glasses are very important when working with this product. When you work with any aerosol, you must have on safety glasses. Gloves shouldn't be required for use of this product. It is a Category 1 flammable, so it will be included in the 25-gallon storage limit for flammables outside of a flammables cabinet. So what that means is you have to add up all of the gasoline, the battery terminal cleaner, any other flammable aerosols, any other Category 1 flammables that you have. If you're over 25 gallons in total, then whatever's over 25 gallons has to be stored in a flammables cabinet. Here we have the SDS for propane. It has both the flammable symbol and the gas cylinder or gases under pressure symbol. Propane is a Category 1 flammable, so it's highly flammable and requires special storage. Propane cylinders must be stored upright and chained to a stationary object. Propane cylinders may be stored on their side inside of a propane locker or a safety locker with the safety relief valve pointing up at the 12 o'clock position. Do not store propane tanks in locations where they could be hit or damaged by forklifts or cars, and never smoke around propane tanks. Alpine Lumber wants to know about exposures. I know sometimes it's a high pressure job, there's a lot going on, you're moving very quickly and you think you need to just keep on moving. But you need to tell someone if you've had an overexposure. We want to make sure you haven't been injured or been made sick by an exposure. And if you have future health problems as a result of some exposure, we want to know what happened and when it happened. We want to know how to prevent it in the future. It helps us and it helps you to let us know when these things happen. We don't want to hear about it 6 months later. You need to tell us when these exposures happen. So what kinds of things would make you think you've been overexposed to a chemical? Maybe your skin becomes dry or blistered. Maybe you get burned after working with a chemical. Your eyes burn, they're watery. Maybe you have respiratory problems that really can't be explained by a common cold or flu. Let someone know if there's been a problem. Alpine Lumber wants to know and we want to fix it.
Original labels on products are very important. Please don't remove them. Labels are an important part of making sure you understand the safety of the product. They'll give you hazard information. OSHA regulations require that original labels remain intact on the product.
Secondary labels. When you transfer a chemical from its original larger container to another container, usually a smaller container, the container you transfer it into is called a secondary container. Why do you think we have to label secondary containers? If that acetone bottle on the left didn't say acetone on it, what would you think it was? You might think that it was water or, I don't know, window washing fluid. Could be anything. But it's a flammable product. On the right, we have a container that you would often see people using to spray weeds. It's actually a diesel oil mix used for lubricating machinery. You really have to put secondary labels on. It's the law, and it's not that hard to do. You'll see signal words on safety data sheets. The two signal words that are used on the new safety data sheets are danger and warning. We don't use the word caution anymore. Danger is the most harmful to a person because of toxicity or exposure concerns or more persistent effects. The word warning is less harmful, lower levels of exposure or toxicity or temporary effects. So let's take the time to review where you find safety data sheets on the Alpine Lumber intranet. What you'll do is you'll click on the Safety tab on the Alpine Lumber intranet. Next, you'll click on the Safety Data Sheets link. Once you see the safety data sheets, you can enter a word in the search bar and it'll bring up any safety data sheet that includes those letters you've entered. If you enter PROP, trying to bring up propane, you can bring up other safety data sheets as well, besides just propane. Using the word diesel, you'll bring up diesel, diesel exhaust fluid, etc. Click on the SDS that you want to view, and it will come up as a PDF. Please ask your supervisor, manager, or me, Lan Berry, I'm the safety manager, if you have any questions or concerns about any of the chemicals you work with.
Let's take a minute to review everything we've gone over and make sure your quiz is complete. First of all, we want to make sure you're using chemicals properly. Wear safety glasses always, and wear gloves as required. Sometimes there will be other PPE required as well. Second, proper storage. Please make use of flammables cabinet where you have them, and good housekeeping with all chemicals is vital. Number 3, please report all injuries, accidents, and even unusual circumstances to your manager. 4, secondary labeling of secondary containers is required. 5, you can find safety data sheets on the Alpine Lumber intranet, on any Alpine Lumber computer, or you can ask your supervisor.